Maureen, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for the invitation to join you and the opportunity to speak to you about these really important issues. And Maureen, you set the stage very well. And of course, a conversation around energy and climate and emissions and environmental issues in the built environment is really timely. It's timely because of our pathway towards decarbonisation and clean energy. It's timely because of the energy crisis we find ourselves in now. And it's timely literally today here in Paris where it's 0 degrees. It's a very cold day here in Paris, and we're reminded of the importance of our well-being and comfort in buildings and the dependence we all have on energy for our daily lives. And we are in the midst of what really is an unprecedented energy crisis right now here in 2023. Since the invasion of Ukraine by Russia last February, we've seen very volatile energy markets. Of course, it's a human tragedy, first and foremost, in Ukraine, but it's also leading to an energy crisis, and that's layered on top of a global climate crisis that we're all very well aware of. These issues are converging in terms of great volatility in energy markets and great uncertainty for us all in economic terms. I say it's the first truly global energy crisis because, of course, we've been through previous crises, particularly some of the famous ones in the 1970s, but really we've never seen something of this depth and extent. We've never seen something that really tackles so many types of energy, not just oil, not just gas, but everything. And we've never seen something that's had such a global impact as we're seeing today. We're seeing very volatile gas prices, particularly here in Europe and also in Asia, excuse me. Prices are a little lower than they were a couple of months ago. We're seeing a lot of different effects around uncertainty and predicting the future, not least the weather. It's been a very, very mild winter in the Northern Hemisphere, which is worrying from a climate perspective, but has brought certain calmness to gas markets in particular. But we know we are now at the vagary of everything from market uncertainty to weather uncertainty in terms of our energy security, particularly in gas markets at the moment. And we know that's not a comfortable place to be. Dependence varies. We're focused here on buildings, and we know that natural gas globally accounts for 40% of all residential heating. But as you can see in this chart, the degree of dependence on natural gas ranges from almost total dependence to almost total independence. And of course, that has, a lot of very direct implications. The current crisis is most acute for countries that rely most on natural gas right now. And of course, particularly those who have been relying previously on Russian natural gas. But more generally, right around the world, we're seeing the impacts of uncertainty, of less secure supply, and of course, of very high prices. We shouldn't forget the extent of hardship that these very high prices are causing. And again, this varies according to national circumstances in terms of where people get their energy from, how they use their energy. But really, we see a lot of people, whether in their homes or in their business environment, are really facing very severe difficulties in affording the good things that energy can bring to our lives in terms of being warm, being cool, being mobile, able to live our lives in a normal, healthy and productive way. And of course, governments around the world are bringing in a very wide range of measures to address these issues. Some of them very expensive, some of them quite controversial, but in many cases really essential in the here and now in terms of protecting people's daily well-being. Consumers have seen huge increases in their bills in the last few months and over the last year or two. Again, it varies by country, but in every case we see quite significant and troubling increases. As Maureen said, my job is head of energy efficiency here at the IEA, so you'll hear me say more than once that energy efficiency measures are the first and best policy to reduce bills. And I think people sometimes don't realize the extent of variation in energy efficiency in our building stock, in our equipment, in our infrastructure, and therefore don't realize the potential to lift up the energy efficiency across all measures and across all parts of our societies. What I'm showing you here is the range of energy demand in homes in the UK. I could show you a similar chart from just about any country in the world. But if you compare the energy costs for people who might be living in very similar homes, literally on the same streets, but depending on their level of energy efficiency and their energy performance certificate rating, their bills could literally be twice as high as their next door neighbours, depending on how the home is insulated, what kind of heating system it's got in place, and of course how they use the energy in the home. So it just reminds us that there's huge variation in our existing building stock in homes, but also in offices, in public buildings, in industry. And that, of course, reminds us of the potential for improvement. And of course, it's also clear that we often see that the people who are most vulnerable are living in the poorest quality housing stock. And so we have this double hit on them, that they find it most difficult to afford to heat their homes, but also their bills are higher because of the quality of their homes. And that's why we see in many countries a strong focus on improving the energy efficiency in poorer people's homes. We see many programs in many parts of the world concentrating their retrofit efforts on the more vulnerable sections of society, and that's very understandable. Energy efficiency also plays a really key role in delivering energy security. And having said that I often find that people don't appreciate the variation in energy efficiency in our societies today, I also find that people don't appreciate actually how much positive progress we have made on energy efficiency in the last couple of decades, particularly in countries that have put in the most policy effort on energy efficiency. One thing, as we analyse energy efficiency progress around the world, we see is that there is a very direct causal link between strong energy efficiency policies and better energy efficiency outcomes. That might sound like a little bit of a trite statement, but it really does make a difference. Where the policies are strong, we see better energy efficiency outcomes. And as a whole, the world is becoming more energy efficient every year. We measure that primarily through what we call energy intensity. So how much economic value do we get out of every unit of energy we use? And typically we improve that by 1 or 2% every year, that we get better at extracting more economic and therefore social value out of the energy we use. Now, if you look at that over the last 20 years among the members of the IEA family, we see that the extent of savings accruing to all of us as energy consumers are worth literally hundreds of billions of dollars every year, because our buildings, our equipment, our societies as a whole have become more energy efficient. I think that's something that's quite invisible to many of us as consumers, but also as experts and policymakers in the field. We don't realize the contribution energy efficiency is already making, not just to bills, of course, but also to our dependence on imported fossil fuels, which is where I began, saying that the countries who are most dependent on buying other people's fossil fuels are the ones facing the most difficulty in the context of the current crisis. And therefore, those societies and those countries that have invested the most effort and finances in energy efficiency in recent years have managed to reduce that dependency and are not feeling the same degree of pain during the current crisis. I think that's a lesson for the next phase, and I do believe that 2022 is a year when many governments realise that now is the time to step up their efforts on energy efficiency, as well as all aspects of clean energy in the coming years.